Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Thank you. And a signal from Dave says we're on the air. And I was going to do it at the end of the program, but let me introduce Dr. John Steubs, who's been with us before, and just say that Dave Elbon is leaving us next Wednesday, and he's been with us 13 years. A tremendous loss, a tremendous individual, really what would be described as a good guy. And technically, there's no problem that we've had that he hasn't been able to fix. So we are really wishing him well, but wishing him also good luck. And don't forget about us. We won't forget you. Dr. John Steubs is with Tria Orthopeadics, right off France Avenue and 494. And they have treated me for various and sundry broken bones, but he was here before that because he is the chief doctor for the Minnesota Twins and has favored us with interviews several times, talking about the Twins, talking about other things, and Tria also represents the Wild.
That's correct.
Who's responsible for more injuries, the Twins or the Wild?
Probably the Wild. I think it's just a more physical game, and baseball injuries tend to be wear and tear, occasionally collision injuries, but not nearly what occurs with hockey and, of course, with football. They're much more demanding and harder to care for, I think.
Now, we asked Brian Dozier, our all-star second baseman, to be with us, and the best we could do was the likeness of him, because he's hunting this weekend in Mississippi with a couple of other ball players. And so he sends his best, but he prefers his hunting to being here. He'll be back here soon enough. And I'm hoping that he's favored with a Golden Glove when those awards are made, because he just had a tremendous year.
Yeah, yes, he really did. And he's a hard-nosed player, plays every day and plays hurt, and has really continued to improve every year, and he makes some spectacular plays in the field, and of course has been much more of a power hitter than anybody would have imagined.
Amazing, really.
Yeah.
For his build, he's not that muscular. He's sort of slight of build, but his timing and his conditioning is just terrific.
You throw him a high fastball inside and he'll hit it. So.
Goodbye. So, now, there is a doctor present at every Twins game. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have an orthopedist present, and then we have a primary care, a medical doctor, too. And so our responsibility is really just to care for the field personnel. So I care for both of the teams and any injuries that are incurred by the home and the visiting team, the umpires, and anybody that's down on the field. I don't have any responsibility for caring for people in the stands. That's a separate medical team.
The people who get hit by bats and balls.
Bats and balls and things, that's a separate medical team.
And you've been doing this for how long?
Well, actually, I think I'm finishing my 27th year doing this. So I started in 1989 and was there, fortunately, 3 years later when they won the World Series. So I thought that was the norm, and I thought I'd have a few more rings over the course of the years, but that really hasn't happened. So
that day may come back.
Well, I hope so. I'm kind of hanging on, hoping that it does come back.
I've been a big Aaron Hicks fan, and I was sorry to see him go in the trade this week. But the other side of the coin is we apparently got a very, very talented young catcher.
Yeah, I don't know about a lot about the catcher that they acquired, but he was a backup with the Yankees and apparently is projected as an everyday player. And I'm like you, Alan. I really liked Hicksy. A good young kid, very laid back California kid, and very talented. And sorry to see him go. I think that he and the other two outfielders we have, Buxton and Eddie Rosario, made for a fantastic outfield.
Rosario came out of no place and turned into an incredible outfielder, so much so that Miguel Sano is probably going to be anchored at third base.
Well, and I don't know exactly what the plans are.
Or maybe in the outfield himself, because Plouffe is still there, and he's another guy who really developed.
And so, I have my favorites and people I like as far as the players, but the actual performance of the players and the decisions that Terry and Rob Antony make are based on trying to improve the team, and I'm sure that they felt that they got a pretty good value in this catcher back for Aaron Hicks. And there are other good young players in the minor leagues and in the pipeline, and so there's so many things that go into those decisions.
I think is another one.
Max Kepler did great at Double-A last year, and so there's so many different things that that enter into those decisions, and I really don't have the depth of knowledge of how you make those decisions. And so it's always been hard when players like Morney and Michael Kadire have gone on into free agency, because over the years with taking care of them, you develop a friendship with them, and they're all young enough to be my kids, but
well, you're young enough to be my kid, so
yeah. So anyway, it's all about trying to put together a team that has all the parts to improve.
Now, a player is injured, and you think this requires the disabled list. He's got to sit it out for a while. And at that point, does Terry Ryan and or Paul Molitor come to you to discuss it? Because the players never want to sit it out unless they're really hurt.
So, yes. I mean, the answer is yes to both of those. I have discussions regularly with Paul Molitor about players when they're injured. And then pretty much every game that I cover, I wander up to Terry's booth and give him an update on players' health and injuries, and make recommendations about whether a player really needs to go on the disabled list. And that decision is a joint decision between the general manager. The trainers are integral in that decision. I mean, they're much more closely attached to the players and see them on a day-to-day basis and have a really good sense for who can play with a little nick or who really needs some time. And so, I serve as a consultant to them, and I really rely on the trainers because their expertise over many years.
Sophisticated. Years ago it was not, but today?
Absolutely correct. And the Twins are very fortunate to have some great athletic trainers, and I really count on them to help me with any assessment and decisions. They're just invaluable.
So now a lot of people who watch us might not know the name Garth Brooks. But John Steubs would know immediately who Garth Brooks is, and he's a big fan of country music. Is this a
true.
lifetime?
Now, how do you know that?
I know these things.
You have your sources, huh?
That's why I researched these interviews. And
so I've been a country fan for probably 15 years, and my teenage son actually got me interested in country music by sending me an anthology of Garth Brooks CDs for Christmas one year. they sat for a few months, and then I opened them and I started realizing I really liked country music. And so, of course, I was hooked on Garth, and that was just about the time he quit playing. So I like a variety of artists, and I've had the opportunity, fortunately, to see Garth when he was here this past year, but there's a lot of talent there as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I have channel 58 and 59, Willie's Roadhouse, on my Sirius, and it's on whenever I'm in the car.
I listen to it in the car too, Ellen. That's
And we've gone
that's
to
my relaxing
Sharon
time.
and I have gone to a lot of concerts over the years, not so many of late, but we have the music, so it's been very enjoyable. You're also a skier, though.
You know what? I have skied and enjoyed it, but not recently. You know, as I've taken care of the twins over the years, it's become harder and harder to ski, just because a lot of the time when we in Minnesota would maybe head to the Rockies and ski in the spring or ski in the later winter is time when I head down to Florida for spring training. So when I started taking care of the twins 20-some years ago, my skiing activities fell off because I spend 3 or 4 weeks in Florida, and it gets hard to take ski vacations when I'm working in Florida on vacation.
I skied for quite a few years ago. My kids are very good skiers. I would ski for hours on end, and they suggested to me that if you can't stand up, give it up. So I did.
So, and I gave it up not because of physical activity, but just didn't have time for it. And I came to skiing a little later. I didn't ski when I was young. I grew up in Minnesota. We have all the snow, but I had friends who skied when I was in high school. But I actually started skiing when I was in college out in California. So I'm probably one of the few people who first started skiing in California.
That's I think that's a song for Garth Brooks right there.
Yeah, maybe so.
Your season actually starts before spring training, though, doesn't it? When they have Twins Fest, don't we have some preliminary physicals at that time, particularly for the new players?
Yeah, you know, it's gotten to be a year-round job to take care of the players because I have responsibility for the major league players plus the minor league players. And so a lot of the minor league players are playing winter ball, and if they get hurt, there are questions asked about them. Players who've been hurt the year before are still rehabbing and rehabilitating through the winter. So, but really in answer to your question, Twins Fest is usually the last weekend in January.
Right, and then 2
they
weeks
bring
later.
and they bring in 35 or 40 of the players. You know, they try to bring as many of the players from the 40-man roster as they can, and on that Saturday and Sunday of Twins Fest we do physicals, and that kind of kicks off the season. And then, so that's the end of January, and like you say, 2 weeks, sometimes 2.5, 3 weeks later, spring training starts. Spring training goes for 6 weeks from mid-February till the end of March, and then there's a 6-month season, and hopefully in the next couple of years the season will continue into October for the Twins.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
They've got the talent there, and they've got a manager who really, really is, I think, a really good manager. And obviously, he stands on his laurels as a player, but I think it's there. And
I think it's just a matter of putting it together. I think I'm excited because you know, our minor league system is really full of talent. It's a matter of, you know, developing that talent, letting that talent come out, and letting it perform at the major league level. And you know, I'm no expert, but my time with professional baseball is there can be really, really talented kids who are world beaters in the minor leagues, but that step from AAA up to the big leagues is a big step, and lots of very, very good players have never kind of fulfilled that potential. Yeah. So it's a bit of an unknown.
Between that and the Wild, though, it goes really full year.
Yeah. It really does, and I don't have responsibility for taking care of the Wild. One of my partners does, but that, you know, they play. They obviously start in getting ready in September, and they train. The players train all summer, and they go into June with the playoffs. So yeah. All the sports have become, other than football is pretty defined, but all the sports have become year-round sports, and I think that, you know, from a medical standpoint, football in my estimation, is the hardest. Bigger injuries, more significant injuries, and more impactful injuries on players' careers.
Yeah, I want to talk about concussions, but
Yes.
you mentioned one of your partners. How big is Tria? You have an incredible state-of-the-art building, and how many doctors and how many other personnel?
Oh, goodness. We have between 30 and 40 doctors. And so we have orthopedic specialists, primary care specialists, we have radiologists in the building, we have a surgery center upstairs, so we have anesthesiologists, and we have that acute injury clinic that you've taken advantage of a couple of times. But there's between 30 and 40 doctors, and actual staff supporting all of us physicians and working at Tria is over 300. So it's a big place, and
It's a big
we have
place,
a very,
and it's
very
a
large physical therapy.
Big payroll also,
yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
And a couple of teams have gravitated over to the clinic, Mayo Clinic.
So yeah, we used to take care of all four of the teams, and then for the last couple of years, the Mayo Clinic has provided physician coverage for the Timberwolves, and then just this year, a large orthopedic group, Twin City Orthopeadics, which is across the metro area, are now the medical providers for the Vikings, and that just happened this year.
It's amazing because I just saw in the paper today, Summit Orthopedics, which is another orthopedic outfit, is going to build a 61,000 square foot building here in Egan. That was just in the local paper today. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of competition
and
out
I'd
there.
heard about that too. And so, a lot of what we do as orthopedists, even joint replacements, hip and shoulder and knee replacements, has moved to an outpatient setting. It's no longer necessarily, depending on your health, done in a hospital setting. So, all of us in the metropolitan community, metropolitan area, have access to outpatient total joints. And so we started doing that at Tria about 10 years ago, and the other groups in town have Twin City Orthopedics, Summit, the various other groups have followed suit, and it's really the evolution of orthopedics. There's more and more that we can do
Of
outpatient.
medicine itself,
Well,
really.
medicine itself. So outpatient facilities, and especially doing things that used to be in the hospital, continues to evolve. We can continue to do them safely and at a less of a cost than in the hospital.
Well, say hello to Heather Thorner for me.
I absolutely
but
will.
I hope if I see her, it's personally and not professionally. But she did a great job on my
I
ankle.
very much will. She's one of our acute injury doctors who's really great.
And let's talk about concussions now. Obviously, we see what's happening in terms of football, and I have a 12-year-old grandson who is really, I guess, an all-star back east, and just was removed from a game with a concussion last Sunday. How big a problem is that? We keep reading about people getting ALS and tying it up to concussions. That's got to be pretty frightening.
Well, there's so much that's not known about that association, Alan, but we do know that concussions are trauma to the brain, and multiple concussions can have a cumulative effect and can lead to traumatic encephalopathy, traumatic kind of chronic traumatic brain injuries. You look at Ali and you look at some of the boxers and others who've taken so many blows to their head, that is cumulative. And the big worry is that is not only at the professional level, concussions are much more focused upon. We know more about it. We're much more careful about concussions because of all of the people that you hear about who played in the in the past in football and now are suffering from various forms of dementia or other brain injuries,
yeah.
chronic brain injuries. And so the biggest concern in my eyes is the young athletes like your grandson. their brains are still developing, and recognizing concussions and protecting as much as we can contact athletes from concussions. And everybody thinks it's just football, but it is baseball. I mean, it's catchers.
He loves lacrosse also.
Yeah.
Those are his two favorite. And there's another tough sport.
Lacrosse is another tough sport. Soccer is a sport where with headers and kids going up to head the ball and hitting each other. I mean, concussions. So
just saw a change in that this week with ages of kids who are allowed to do headers.
Yeah, and so I think that there's a concern there too. So it's not just football, but the NFL is very much focused on it, and baseball a couple years ago, as you know, we've talked about this maybe once before, had a rash of concussions in our catchers, and Morneau had a concussion with substantial, long-term effects, and so Maurer, yes, and so it's just a matter of trying to recognize the concussion, and especially for kids and high school kids and things, having a medical professional who can recognize a concussed athlete and protect the athlete from repeat injury and allow the brain to recover before that brain is subjected to another injury. And it's a big problem, and I think it's you can't, with the size of professional football players, you can't protect against concussions completely. No matter the gear, they can do the best that they can, but it's
contact sport.
It's a contact sport, and I know that I've heard a number of parents who really are concerned about their kids playing football, and so there may be a drying up of the talent or the available young athletes, as parents are very concerned about long-term effects of concussions for their kids.
And certainly it's something of concern to everybody. You want your kids to be active, you want them to be athletic, you want them to be in sport, but you don't want that sport to shorten their life or really endanger them. Now, how did you decide to go into orthopedics?
Well, I grew up in Rochester, and I grew up kind of under the shadow of the Mayo Clinic, and so I determined when I was away at college that I wanted to be a physician, and I always had an interest in sports. I participated in numerous sports in high school and then at various levels in college, and so sports medicine and taking care of athletes was kind of in its infancy when I did my orthopedic residency in 1979 to 84. But that's I chose medicine because I wanted to focus and become an orthopedic surgeon and take care of athletes. So I've been able to realize that dream over my career. But it was sports medicine and caring for athletes that was my focus and why I went into medicine.
Now, relate to us some of the most interesting experiences that you've had that you can talk about. Obviously, physician-patient privilege and all that, with the twins.
Oh, goodness. I don't know where to start, because there have been, I think the situation with Maurer is one that, had caught a lot of press and things, and Joe had a couple of concussions when he was younger, and then had a significant concussion being hit by a ball, and got over that concussion, and yet, took the counseling. He and his wife, Maddie, took very seriously the risk to him as a catcher,
as well he should,
for further injury, and elected to give up a very, very, a great career behind the plate for concerns about the long-term implications of multiple concussions.
Another one that pops into my head is Corey Koski.
And
his career ended.
And Koski, we've had a number, Koski and Morneau, and the taking care of those has been multidisciplinary. The physicians I work with, have cared for those concussions. The medicine doctors have cared for those. But each of those players, in a concussion situation, get expertise, get the care of a concussion expert. And certainly Koski and Morneau have traveled to other places around the country just to have their case analyzed and to really assure all of us that we were doing the right thing as far as managing them. So, you know, I don't know, I probably could share this. I don't think Kent Herbeck would mind. It's kind of a unique story. When he was with the Twins, and this was probably in my second or third year, maybe a little bit later than that, but within the first 3 or 4 years of taking care of the Twins, Herbeck dislocated his shoulder. He dove for a ball at first base, dislocated his shoulder. He rolled over, sat up, pulled it back into place, and then came up to the training room. I don't see athletes on the field. They're brought up by the trainers to the clubhouse and the training room. And so I was examining him in the clubhouse in front of the trainer. I'm not sure if the manager at that time, Tom Kelly, was there, but the owner, Carl Pohlad, was there because he was concerned about his player. And so I was examining Herbeck, and I redislocated his shoulder. As I was examining him, I popped his shoulder back out, and it went right back in. But of course, you can imagine my embarrassment in my exam to have redislocated Herbeck's shoulder in front of the owner. And then Kent is a good friend, but Herbie for years called me Dr. D, Dr. Dislocate.
Well,
so that's probably one of the more entertaining stories.
The statute of limitations has run on that, so
yeah.
we won't worry
and
about it.
Herbeck, to his credit, I mean, people who dislocate their shoulder and then he dislocated it again, a lot of times that requires surgery, and Herbeck never had surgery for it. He was one of those unique, fortunate ones who had a couple of dislocations but never required surgery to fix it. So anyway, but another thing that, just one last little thing with the Twins is that I've been with them for 27 years, so when I first started, the players were like my younger brothers. I was 37, and Bushy and Herbeck and Gaetti and all those guys were in their early 30s, so they're like younger brothers. Gradually over time, they have become like sons in terms of age, and now I have sons that are older than most of our players, and so and yet they're still friends. The nice thing about baseball and the number of games and the time I share with them is that those players become friends, and those that stay in town become my patients as they age.
And that's in particular, I think you can say that with the Twins. And it's the same reason why players, and I see we only got a minute left, players come back. Koski wanted to live here. Morneau still has a house here. Mauer, of course, is local, but
well, and
Torrey Hunt is another one.
Herbeck, Larkin, Scotty Leas, Tim Laudner. There's just a multitude of players who are from other parts of the country who have made their home in Minnesota after they played, and especially with the ball players. It really is true.
We have about 20 seconds. Projection where the Twins going to end up this year?
You know, I think if everything falls into place and the players progress as we expect, I think they have a chance to challenge the Royals. The Royals are still going to be top, I think, in the American League, but the Twins should get into the playoffs. Pitching. I think that we've got a real good chance of getting in the playoffs, and then if you get hot and get lucky in the playoffs, just like Kansas City last year, you can go a long way. Not this year, but last year.
Dr. John Steubs, thanks again.
Alan, it's really a pleasure. I always enjoy coming and talking to you.
A pleasure is right.